Welcome to Coffee, Eggs and Inspiration. In this edition I'm going to be talking to Jack Trigger, a professional sailor, a type 1 diabetic, and he's about to leave for a round the world solo journey on his yacht. Let's go. So Jack, tell me a little bit more about Jack Trigger racing. Who are you? You're a professional sailor. You know, what does that mean?
Yeah, right. I guess you summarised it pretty well. Professional sailor, type 1 diabetic, about to sail around the world. That's probably my identity, right? How did I get there? Started sailing when I was 6. So that's me basically. Passionate about it. Adventure. Competition, trying to go faster.
And what sort of boats do you like in the day job, so to speak? What sort of boats do you race?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I started in dinghies, small boats. We have fantastic Olympic pathways in this country, and then I moved into bigger boats because I wanted to sail further, and the adventure thing and the idea of sailing off across an ocean. You romanticize it a bit, but it's a different challenge, and the challenge probably suits me a bit better. Day to day now, the boats that I'll sail around the world are big, fast, powerful, 60-foot long, carbon fibre monohulls, top speed, 40 mile an hour. Yeah.
And is that on hydrofoils?
On hydrofoils.
Wow.
Yeah. So we describe them as foil assisted. So they're not fully flying the whole time. And that's difficult in a sea state, right? Big waves.
Yeah.
I'm sure
you're sort of crashing into the next wave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you go up, you've got to come down again.
Yeah.
And it's endurance sport. It's about average speeds. It's not about top speeds.
Yeah.
And then these boats are sailed by one person.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my whole world. But it expanded quite quickly when I got a bit older.
Yeah.
Started following these round the world races and. I guess the tangent for me is Olympic racing is quite technical, but generally the boats are all identical.
Yeah.
So you're racing in one design fleets.
Yeah.
I love technology. I love innovation. I love engineering. I went to study engineering at university. I love making things. I love fixing things.
Yeah.
So when I realised that there's this whole side of the sport where you're building, testing, designing, developing boats to go faster and faster, I was like, right, I'm in.
Yeah.
That's what
all over it. So tell me about the big trip. You want to sail around the world, solo.
Yeah.
You're a type 1 diabetic.
Yeah.
Okay. Where to start? First of all, when are you going?
Right. So it's a race. So it's not about just going and doing it, and that's quite important to me because I'm a competitive guy and it's about the racing, it's about trying to win. That's what drives me, that's what I'm motivated by. So the race is called the Vendée Globe, and it's probably one of the toughest sporting challenges left in terms of the outright challenge, and kind of for context, statistically, I think over 7,000 people have been up Everest now.
Right.
I think over 700 people have been into space, something around that number, and only just over 100 people have sailed non-stop, solo and unassisted around the world.
Wow, so 7,000 up Everest, 700 in space,
Yeah.
and 100 around the world. Wow, so this is a very small apex group.
It's unique.
Very unique,
It's
yeah.
unique.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's a function of the race is hard, it's difficult to finish, and it's a big challenge to take on.
Yeah.
But also building the project to go and do it.
No doubt.
is difficult.
And you're in that build phase at the moment. What's the date of the?
Yeah, right. So the next race is it starts in November 2024, November the 10th, which is my birthday, and it's every 4 years.
Yeah. So 2.5 years. From
2.5
we're
years.
filming in June 2022.
Yeah. So in the scheme of things, it's not that far away. I guess if we wind back pre-COVID, I really started out my solo racing career, racing in a division down, call it Formula 2, Very similar style of racing, similar boats. The boats are 40 foot long rather than 60 foot long. So
long distance?
Long distance.
So what sort of distances? What would
we basically do all the same races in tandem with the Formula One, with the Immoca 60 fleet. It's a class of boat that do the Vendée Globe. We just don't do the round the world race.
Okay, you do a single leg or maybe a couple of legs.
Well, yeah. So the transatlantic races are the big ones.
Right.
So the last big solo race I did was a solo transatlantic race called the Ruby Rum.
Wow. So where do you leave from and where do you arrive in the transatlantic, for example?
Yeah. I mean, super cool. And in the UK, we kind of don't see much of this world. So it starts in France, starts in Saint-Malo, just across the channel from us.
Yeah.
And it's massive. There are like 2 million people that come through the race village before the race.
Wow.
Live TV and thousands of spectators at the start. 123 boats, 123 competitors, I think. And then you're off. You're off.
And where's the destination? Where do you land? Is there, I assume there's a specific point, right?
Yeah, right.
Just
anywhere. No, exactly. So that's a pretty simple race. You start in Saint-Malo, you finish in Guadeloupe.
Right.
There's a little complexity at the end where you have to go all the way around the island of Guadeloupe.
Okay.
At the end, which is actually a bit of a nightmare because you've done this whole long
victory lap.
Your victory lap, but no, because you've done this whole long, challenging transatlantic crossing. That's 18 days for me.
Right.
A bit faster for the bigger boats, a bit slower for the small boats, but 2.5 weeks, you're broken.
No
you've been racing in open ocean, and then suddenly you're at the end of this race, you're sleep deprived, and you've got to race around the back of this island, which is a volcanic island, and there are these massive wind shadows.
Sure.
On the other side of the island, so the
fluky wind.
It's all over the place. It's coming from one direction and the other direction. And meanwhile, you've slowed down because you've sailed into no wind, and so all your competitors are coming up behind you. So it's super high stress, and you've got rocks to avoid, and crazy way to finish the race.
Sounds crazy. Well, that's 18 days.
Yeah.
How many legs is the full race?
So the full race, it's non-stop, remember. So the full race the record is 74 days.
74 days. I assume there's waypoints along the way though, right?
So, the course is pretty simple. So the course is, you start again in France, in Le Sable d'Olonne in the Bay of Biscay. Hook a left, south down the Atlantic, hook a left, round the bottom of South Africa, Cape of Good Hope. And then you sail south of Australia, New Zealand. So the next cape is Cape Leeuwin, south of Australia. All the way along the South Pacific, and then it's left around Cape Horn and back up the Atlantic, finishing the same place.
But you don't stop. You don't have landfall.
No.
Okay.
Non-stop.
Okay. So you talked about sleep deprivation before. How do you sleep? Or when do you sleep?
Good question. It's really difficult to put a rule on that. You sleep when you can. So I guess if I give you some context around what it's like to sail boats, your first challenge is to keep the boat going as fast as possible in a straight line. And the boats are all manually powered, apart from you have an autopilot, which helps to steer the boat.
Right. So you can set a track.
Set a track. Yeah. So you can fix that to a compass heading.
Yeah.
Or to a wind angle.
And that will adjust to currents and wind and...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a requirement for sailing these boats on your own, because you can't steer the boat the whole time. No. But, it's not as good as it sounds. Again, the analogy is like a race car. The boats are designed to be as fast as possible. And so they're really good when they're in that window, but the window is really narrow.
Right.
So as soon as the conditions change, the boat's either uncontrollable or it's going really slowly.
Right.
And the autopilot is I guess, one of those trim tools in terms of keeping the boat in that window. So you're constantly changing. So yeah, you're trying to go as fast as you can in a straight line, which means having the right sails in the air for given conditions, having them trimmed correctly, so we can change the shape of the sails.
Sure.
It's a lift drag equation, so maximising power, reducing drag for the conditions that you have. And then you're also trimming the hydrofoils.
Yeah.
trimming the balance of weight distribution over the boat. You might have ballast, water ballast, pump water into tanks and out of tanks. And then things like your autopilot settings, so how your autopilot responds to. So that's number one, keeping the boat going fast in a straight line. Again, easy if the conditions aren't changing. If you've got fixed wind, fixed waves.
What is the window? You mentioned the window. What's the idea? And it's a hydrofoil assisted, I think. So let's talk about that. But what's the window for it? What's the sweet spot?
So it's pretty broad. You've just got to change the setup. So the boats are designed to sail in 5 knots all the way up to 40 plus knots, because you've got to sail through some pretty big systems to get around the world. Equally, you've got to sail across the equator where there's no wind. But in terms of a 2-knot change in average wind, and you're changing settings. A small change in the direction of the waves, and you're changing settings, because you're trying to go as fast as possible the whole time.
Wow.
And the wind and the waves are never the same.
No.
They're always changing.
Well, speaking of the waves, it's a hydrofoil.
Yeah.
But I think the way you describe it is hydrofoil assisted. What does that mean?
Yeah, right. So the rule prohibits the boats from having lifting surfaces on the rudders at the back of the boat. So we're allowed hydrofoils, but they're only in the middle of the boat. So I will call it like a 3-legged stool. So we're lifting from the middle of the boat. That's not particularly stable because the boat can pitch.
Yeah. So it'll lift the hull out of the water,
so
clear of the water.
It will lift the hull clear of the water. But if you imagine, just trying to balance on lifting out the centre of the boat, that's really hard. So generally, the solution at the moment is to sail with the transom back of the boat in the water, and then you're lifting at the front. And that's also quite nice because then you're not burying the nose into waves so much.
Yeah. So I assume if it sort of hits a wave, then that you're no longer lifted, are you?
No, and the decelerations are huge. We're talking like 2G deceleration.
Oh wow!
Because you're doing 40 mile an hour.
40 miles an hour.
I mean, maybe 30s plus when it's windy.
So 40 miles an hour. That's sort of about 65 kilometres an hour.
Yeah, and then you hit a wave and you stop.
Can you go over? Can these things capsize?
Generally, no.
It's a large boat, right?
It's a large boat, and it has a keel underneath.
Yeah.
So unless something goes seriously wrong and the keel falls off, which has happened, the boat's not going to capsize.
Right.
It will lay itself on its side if you get it wrong.
Yeah.
But then that's a case of taking sails down, and sorting everything out, hoping you haven't broken too many things.
Yeah. Jeez. What about eating? How do you eat?
Yeah. So you're going as fast as you can in a straight line. You then got to look after yourself. And you've got to look after the boat. So you obviously can't be paying attention to the boat the whole time because you've got to sleep, you've got to eat. So food, trying to be as lightweight as possible, but you've got to get the right nutrition as well. Exactly. Yeah. Freeze-dried food. Yeah. Right.
So you have a little pot somewhere that you heat it up, or
have a jet boil.
Yeah.
Camping stove, boil water. Yeah. It's basically all you can do, and then it's dehydrated meals because we don't carry the water. We have a water maker, desalinator.
Okay, so
takes seawater,
scoop it up,
reverse osmosis, filters the salt water out, the salt out of the water.
Right.
And you use that, boil that water, use that to rehydrate the food. So the weight saving is huge over 70 plus days.
It does, yeah. And what if there's a problem? Breakage, whether your own limbs or part of the boat, do you have support?
There's no support on the racetrack other than the guys you're racing against, guys and girls that you're racing against.
So what happens? You're sailing around the Cape of Good Hope. It's blustery there, as I understand it. I've never been there myself. Something breaks. What happens?
So the first thing is you try and fix it yourself.
Yeah.
If you're serious about finishing the race, I think historically it's about a 50% finish rate. Mostly because of technical failures, because it's brutal on the boats. So if you're a well-prepared team, you'll have prepared as best you can for every eventuality. So you run through everything that could possibly break, try and run life cycles, failure cycles on those parts, and then you have solutions, redundancy to fix them or to live without them. And that could be, again, you're trying to save weight, so it could be that there's another bit of the boat that you could use to fix that bit of the boat that's not as important, that may be useful, but you could do without it, kind of thing.
So the engineering qualification that you have must come in quite handy.
Things break every day on these boats because they're prototypes. So, hopefully they're just small things, they're not race endless, but you've got to be on top of them.
They're prototypes.
Yeah, they're prototypes.
Can't they finalise it before you go on a 70-day trip around the world?
Well, how much time have you got and how much money have you got?
Okay.
Basically.
But if all of that fails, you're sort of lost at sea. I assume you've got a transponder or something similar, so an emergency service can get to you. Radio, I imagine.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the technology is amazing now, and compare it to 20 years ago, I'd call it relatively safe. The boats are a lot faster. Sailing the boats is a lot more brutal because of the speed. But you're in touch with land the whole time. The safety systems that we have are pretty incredible. And I guess the new element to sailing these boats, which people who are familiar with sailing probably won't realise, is that it's very different to going out sailing a dinghy or even a regular race boat. And we sort of moved away from intuitive sailing, feeling the boat, trying to make it go faster by feel, to effectively managing a system. So
you've got a lot of data.
There's loads of data. There's loads of data. Managing, effectively reading loads. We've got fibre optic strain gauges all over the boat, so through the hull, through the mast, in the hydrofoils. So you're managing that whole time, and the boats are so powerful that with the hydrofoils, because the hydrofoils, jump around a little bit here, but the hydrofoils, we talked about assisted foiling, foil assisted. So the foil is lifted by out of the water, which reduces drag, which makes you go faster. But the hydrofoil is also generating stability. So if you think of the hydrofoil out the low side of the boat in the water, as the boat leans over, you've got the hydrofoil in the water. The more the boat leans over, the hydrofoil generates lift and it wants to bring the boat back upright.
Okay.
It's like when you see racing.
So you're increasing your surface area for the sail at the same time, right?
Yeah, sure.
Lessening the deflection.
Yeah,
factor.
sure. Exactly. Yeah, projected area. Exactly. So if you picture your racing yacht with 10 people sat on the side of the boat, on the high side of the boat, the more people you've got there, the faster it goes.
Right.
Because it's more stability. You generate more power from the sails without it falling over.
Gotcha.
The hydrofoil does the same thing, but without adding the weight.
So I suppose the way to think about that, if it's leaning right over, then the wind's coming from here, it's sort of just skimming across the sail and bouncing off, so catching some of that power, but if it's upright, it's really driving into it.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of I guess it's a secondary thing. It's more about opposing forces. So I think the way it was described to me when I was a teenager, learning to dinghy sail is, think about squeezing a bar of soap.
Right.
And it fires out the other side. So you need opposing forces. So if you've got the wind on the sail, and only the wind on the sail, then the boat's just going to go sideways, not very quickly, or it's going to fall over.
Right.
So that's why we add hydrofoils under the water. So your keel then provides lateral load in the other direction.
And the keel itself has a hydrofoil on it?
Doesn't have a hydrofoil.
Doesn't?
No.
Okay.
It depends how much detail you want to get into. The hydrofoil, the keel on these boats can cant, so it can swing to either side on a hydraulic ram. So it can do that up to 45 degrees each side. So that the keel fin is 4.5 meters long, and you've got approximately 3 tons of lead on the bottom of it. So that's what keeps the boat upright. So when you swing that out to the side, it's a bigger lever.
Gotcha.
It's more righting moment, so more power. The other cool thing, if you really want to get into detail, is nowadays the pivot for the top of the keel is inclined. So when the keel's in the middle, it's neutral. But the more you cant the keel, because of the incline on the pin, you then put angle of attack into the fin, into the keel fin, and then it acts as a hydrofoil.
Well, a lot's changed since I was sailing lasers. I think it was just you had to bring the centreboard up and make sure you weren't hit in the head by the boom, and that was pretty much it. What are you most looking forward to, and what are you most nervous about on the trip?
I'm looking forward to getting out there and doing it, just because, you know, the build-up is so long, and it takes so much to get to the start line.
Do you have a favourite region of the world to sail in terms of conditions?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to. I've never sailed in the Southern Ocean,
Okay.
and that's a big part of the race.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward
I can tell you a
to.
bit about the Southern Ocean.
You certainly can.
I'm from the Southern
Yeah.
Ocean. It's cold.
Yeah, yeah, it's cold.
The
and
waves are big.
Yeah, yeah, and I hear it's a pretty nasty place to be at times.
It can be.
So looking forward to that because it has this kind of mythical thing in the sailing world, but also apprehensive about it. You're a long way from anyone.
So two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
You're also a type 1 diabetic. That is a story for a different video for now. I'm going to wish you good luck with the trip, and keep on following the series, and we'll talk to Jack about all sorts of other topics like type 1 diabetes, his equipment, and what happens next.